Hello everybody, welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to do some hand lettering, and this is for absolute beginners. So if you've never attempted hand lettering before, you will be able to do it by the end of this video using supplies that you already own. So you do not have to touch a brush pen if you don't want to. I'm going to teach you how to do it with all of these supplies here, and I'm going to teach you 2 separate fonts. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so I've zoomed you guys in a little bit, and I just want to go over some very basic rules before you begin. I'm going to go super fly fast so you don't get bored, all right? This is a Zig clean dot marker, and you'll notice that if I push very gently, it makes a small dot, right? But the harder I push, the bigger, whoa, that's quite big. The harder I push, the bigger the dot becomes. And what this is an example of is pressure. Ding, 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 right? Hopefully I won't get copyrighted for that. Anyway, moving on. That is going to be the primary foundation for each utensil you use. It's going to be pressure. On the upstrokes, you want a lighter pressure, and on the downstrokes, you want a harder pressure. I'm going to use a brush pen just for that example to show you, but like I said, I'm going to be using the other utensils instead. So on the upstroke, you're doing very light pushes. And then when it comes to your downstroke, you're doing harder presses, right? And it's that differentiation between the 2 types of pressure that's going to make it easier for you to do that lovely font 1, right? So if I write happy, I'm going light and then push down. Light, push down. So just in that H, you can see where I have applied more and less pressure. So now that you kind of understand that foundational basic, let's actually get into how you life hack that with different supplies. Okay, so we are going to start with a pencil, and you can use absolutely any pencil with the exception of a Unikuru Toga, because the way that the lead rotates prevents it from getting a chiseled edge, and you need the chiseled edge to accomplish that thick and thin definition. So the first thing that you want to do is you're going to grab your pencil, and then on your upstroke, you're going to apply a slight amount of pressure just to the very tip. So again, I'm just going to do the word hello, or the start of it at least, and as you're going up, you just use that very fine tip, right? I'm going to stop there. Then on your way down, you're going to rotate the tip just slightly to get the chiseled part of the lead to make a more pronounced line there. And now I'm doing this separately to demonstrate, but you can totally do it all together. So again, you're going to do a light stroke, slightly rotate the lead, and then push down harder on the way down. Again, slight, rotate, push, and then back up. And then if I'm going down, I'm gonna push, I'm going up, I'm going really light. Down, we're pushing, and then again, rotate slightly for a thinner upward, and then back down again. Do you see how just I'm very slightly rotating the pencil between the thicker and thinner part of the chiseled tip? That is going to be probably the most important thing that you're going to take away from this, because a couple of the utensils that I've used that I'm going to be using will follow this same rule. So that is it for the pencil, and if you want to practice, I know some people suggest doing the whole alphabet. You can do that too. I just generally prefer doing full words instead to really get into that motion of swiveling the tip, but it's totally up to you. Whatever you feel is most comfortable. Okay, moving on. The second utensil is going to be a ballpoint pen. This one, I know it looks kind of funny, but this is just a Faber-Castell 0.7, but this is a ballpoint tip. I generally recommend a higher thickness for ballpoint pens. Of course, you can do it with any thickness, but the thicker the tip is, the more you'll be able to see the variation between the thick and thin lines. But the same rules apply. Instead of rotating the tip, however, it's going to be purely based on pressure. So on your upstroke, it's going to be a very light pressure. Ooh, not that light though. Make sure there's still ink coming out. Hold on, there we go. And then you're just going to push harder on that downstroke. Very light, and then push. Right, light, push, 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 push. I sound like a birthing person. Okay, anyway, so that's an example of one ballpoint pen. And just to show you a different example, I'm gonna also grab a Uni Jetstream, and this is a 1.0 tip, so just slightly thicker, but again, just light at the top, and then you're pushing hard when you get to those down strokes. And I know that at first this might be really overwhelming because I understand it can be hard to coordinate where your hands are going, your grip, your placement. So that's why I honestly, the only thing I can suggest is practice, which I know is so stupid, right? That's like the worst piece of advice someone can give you is just practice. I know how annoying that is. But anyway, as long as you're just practicing those light upstrokes and harder downstrokes, you will get this in no time because that's all it is. You don't even have to write in cursive if you don't want to. You can write regular, right? So I'm gonna just write the word apple. See, that's not cursive, but you kind of get the same or similar effect, right? All right, moving on. Now we're gonna try with a highlighter. And as you'll notice, the tip is chiseled just like the pencil, so we're gonna use the same technique. So you're just gonna hold the highlighter in your hand, not vertical, but horizontal. And as you do those lighter top strokes, you can see I've been practicing. As you do those lighter top strokes, you're gonna lean towards the point. And as you do the thicker strokes, you're gonna lean towards the other side. So my point is on the right side. So I'm going to lean right as I go up and then push down as I come down, okay? Leaning right, leaning left, leaning right, left. And you do that until you can see that difference between the two. I'm going to do one more example because I can see my focus went out a little bit. So this is a mega close-up. You're leaning towards the tip on your way up, and then as you come down, you're going to make it flat, so you're leaning to the left. Do you see that variation? This one takes more practice than the other ones, I will admit, just getting used to that swivel of the hand. Okay, we are moving on to gel and fine liner, and I'm grouping them into the same technique because you're gonna do the exact same thing for the both of them. And this is kind of like, I guess, a cheat code, but anyway, you're just gonna write in regular cursive whichever word you'd like. And because you aren't able to get a very good thick and thin definition between the two, you're gonna go over any downward stroke with an extra line and fill it in. So as you can see, it gives the same kind of visual appearance. It's just a different technique, because if I were to go up and then down, you don't see that thickness definition as well as the other ones. So that's kind of like a life hack there, and then the same works for the fine liner. I'm not going to demonstrate because it's literally the exact same. For a marker, again, it's almost the exact same. I'm just going to demonstrate because it's a little bit different, only because the more you layer with a marker, the more you'll be able to see the color building up better. So you just have to be a little more careful about where you're placing it, because if you go over it too many times, then it'll really darken up, which can also be used for like shadowing effects. If you are interested in that, I'm just letting you know that with a marker, you want to be a little more careful about how you are adding thickness, but it can be done, so don't be discouraged. And then finally, I am going to show you how to do it with a brush pen too, just in case you have one lying around but you've never been able to master it. This is the easiest one to use out of all of them, just because the nib is super flexible and it's been made to accommodate for these harder and softer strokes. So you go up really soft and then you push down on your way down, and it just gives you that beautiful variation. You don't even have to rotate the pen at all, because this tip is, like I said, it's specific for this purpose. Okay, moving on to font number 2. Now that you understand the basics of pressure, that's going to be really easy to apply to different fonts. So I'm back to my pencil here, and like I said before, on your downstrokes you're pushing harder using that thicker side of the chisel edge, And then anytime you go across or up, it's going to be much thinner. So if I do an O, I'm pushing hard, and then on my way up, I'm pushing a lot lighter. And N, I'm going to push down, and then when I come up, it's going to be a lot lighter, and then T, push down and across, it's going to be lighter. So it gives you that same kind of variation between the thicker and the thinner. And the same can be done for all the other supplies. So if we move on to ballpoint, again, I'm just pushing down and then being really thin and light on my upstrokes. To achieve that. And then with all of the lines that are going across, for this particular font, you want them to be really small and really high up to kind of give that appearance. If you're using gel or fine liner, you're just going to use that life hack that I taught you earlier, where you're going to outline it instead. And if you're using highlighter, it's quite easy because you just do a big fat line with smaller ones. This one you don't really even have to worry about pressure, it's just about rotation like I mentioned. Just like that. And again, with the marker, you're using the same tip as here, just being more careful with where you're overlaying. See, because the more you go over one area, the more it darkens. And then finally, once again, with an actual brush pen, you're just pushing hard on your way down and then not at all on your way up. And like that. Anyway guys, that's it for today. Let me know down below if this was helpful, and if it was, please consider subscribing and giving it a big thumbs up. I will see you next time. Thank you so much for sticking by me. Bye-bye.